Hey, friends. Welcome to the Coop Chicks in Charge podcast. I'm Malena Putnam, the CEO of Chicks in Charge and Yay Dude, a media and marketing company. And Chicks in Charge is based here in Oklahoma City, and we have started launching chapters around the country. We're super excited to grow this community of fun and fierce boss chicks. And guess what? I've got one of our OGs with me today. Her name is Suzann Wade, and she is a corporate culture coach as well as an innovation facilitator. She's super smart, one of the most creative people that I know, and really being able to pull that creativity out from you. Plus, with her past in ministry, she's just super empathetic and shows so much grace for people around her. So, we are so lucky to have her on the show today. And we are doing a series right now that is based on our Read and Lead book club, which is a big part of our Chicks in Charge club. And every 2 months, we read a different personal development book. And so I asked all of our chicks, I was like, okay, guys, which ones were you most impacted by? And why? And would you be willing to come on the show and talk to us about it? And so Suzann was like, sign me up. I've got my book. And so, Suzann, I want you to tell everybody what that book is and why you selected it.
Okay, so the book that I selected is Untamed by Glenn Doyle. And I selected it because when I read it, I just kept going, yes, 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 yes. Like with everything that she talked about, it not only confirmed a lot of what I believe, but it also pushed me to like kind of go that next level, and to really break out of the cages that I had built for myself or that others had built around me. So I love it. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. Now, saying that, there may be some of you who are a little more analytically minded, not quite as woo, that you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, like this girl is so freaking cheesy. And she is, but in a really good way. I mean, she's pushing us to kind of be our best selves and to recognize that so many of the limitations that we put upon ourselves are voices that we have in our head, either from our past experiences or, from people who have tried to hold us down. And as women, there are just so many limitations we put upon ourselves that are society's way of keeping us down. Like one of the things that she talks about that I think a lot of us over the last few years have come to recognize and realize is that, for one thing, racism is in the air that we breathe. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were raised in a culture that is racist, and we were raised in a culture that was misogynist. And so it's all in the air that we breathe, and we internalize it, whether we realize we're internalizing it or not. And that's why there are forces at work that benefit greatly from keeping women down. And there are forces at work that benefit greatly from keeping people of color down. And so a lot of our institutions, a lot of the things we're taught very early are meant to keep us down. Like, I was wrestling with this idea. I struggle with the educational system a lot in terms of how hard it is for boys, because, it's a system that's designed to, where you have to like sit and focus for extended periods of time when you're a child, mm-hmm. which is hard to do. And for a while I thought, well, that's one of those areas where boys are held back more. And then I thought, no, not really, because as we have this whole notion of, even if you think of like what little girls are made of and what boys are made of, that notion is not really, it's one that is like designed to say boys can be wild. Boys don't have to be caged, but girls are supposed to be sweet and caged. And, there's one of the things like we talk about something being unbecoming of a lady. And one of the notions that Glennon really ties into is unbecoming, that we need to unbecome. We need to unlearn the things that we've been taught. And I don't think it's like giving anything away, but the story she starts out with is a story of going to the zoo with her daughter, and they're at the cheetah cage. And so there's this dog that is the cheetah's friend. This cheetah has been raised in captivity. And so the dog, they have a pickup truck with a bunny on the back. And so the truck takes off and the dog takes off after the bunny. And at the end, the dog gets a treat. And so it's like, you see how fast the dog runs after the pickup truck. Well, then they let the cheetah out of its like confinement that it had been in within the cage. And the cheetah chases after the pink bunny on the pickup truck. And when it gets to the end of its cage, it gets a big steak. And then her daughter notices that the cheetah is over at the edge of the area where it lives, and is kind of looking out the fence and has this glimmer in its eye, sort of like it's remembering. There's a part of it that instinctually knows that there's more out there, that it was born to be more wild. And the reality is we were all born to be more wild than we are, you know? And, you know, so she has this phrase of, you know, looking at the cheetah and saying, you know, you weren't meant for this. You're a goddamn cheetah, you know? And so, I mean, that's the thing, is realizing that we are all women, and that is a fiery, powerful thing. And so when I read it, it was just like, yes, because I was coming out of an environment that had held me down and held me down and held me down. And so when I read it, it was like all the stuff that I had been teaching to others all those years, but being able to hear it for myself and going, yeah, this is exactly right. So that's kind of why I chose to talk about it.
Okay. Well, so for all the listeners out there, if you have not read Untamed yet, first of all, if you're watching us on our YouTube channel or through our website, this is what the book is. I'll put the link in show notes, and then I'm going to put all of these in our read and lead tab on our website, which is chicksincharge.club. So the reason that this book, I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, why it resonates with so many, and why we're calling this episode, why remembering your wild is the key to happiness from Untamed, is because the unhappiness comes when we do feel tied down, caged, when we are treated like that cheetah, to say, oh, you want the steak? Then you've got to do what I tell you to do, or you're not going to get that, versus what we authentically want to do, and chasing our own dreams that come from us and our unique superpower, being who we are, the skills that we have, understanding our personality and having that self-awareness. I think that if we could empower even just one listener today to understand that, and to let them know that there is liberation from using your voice, and understand that we're all in this boat together. So if we can support one another in that, and then also, right, not being the one that's holding out the pink bunny to say,
right, exactly,
you don't have to do what I want you to do. Same thing, like if you're a leader in a company, if you are a parent. I know that, you know, all three of my kids have taken, you know, different paths, and I love that. Like I want them to be who they authentically want to be. I have my son's a senior in high school, and, you know, just talking to him about, what do you want your life to be? You know, what do they want that next journey to be? Instead of us as the parent or leader telling others, this is what you have to do, asking them, what do you want?
Right.
You know, and then helping them along the way for what that's going to be, what that's going to look like. So here's how they describe the book. So she's saying, even here in this jacket cover, this is how you find yourself. There is a voice of longing inside
Mhm.
each of us. We strive so mightily to be good partners, daughters, mothers, employees, and friends. We hope all this striving will make us feel alive. Instead, it leaves us feeling weary, stuck, overwhelmed, and underwhelmed. We're kind of like, is this it? Like, is this what life is supposed to be like? And so having something like this telling us, like, return to your wild. You can let go of the anxiety and the stress
Mhm.
by using our voices. And so, what were some of the other themes, and what are those things that you bookmarked that you feel like really helped you the most and that you like to share with others? Let's go over those. You can see here, if you can see the video, I've got a bunch of tagged posts as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that like there are a lot of things like I have to show you. Like I went back and reread this and like I started just writing things in the front.
Hey, I love writing in books.
I
100%.
yeah, I was like underlining a bunch and all the things they say not to do with your books, you underline, you fold down the corners, all those things.
Yeah.
And you know, I have to say, when I was rereading this, I actually was coming out of a week that I spent in the jungle. Like last week, I was in Costa Rica in the jungle, and
Cool.
I spent an hour one day watching butterflies. And I think that that's one of those things that, like in the culture that we live in, that notion of just spending an hour watching butterflies. I didn't even know it was an hour until somebody came along and went, "Hey, are you coming to breakfast?" And I was like, "Wait, breakfast is an hour. Oh, wait, now that's now."
Oh, Suzann, I love that. And butterflies are my favorite.
And
So,
they were these blue butterflies that were about this big. And I mean, they were just so gorgeous. And it wasn't like they were everywhere, but it was like one would fly by every 5 or 10 minutes or so. And it's like you're just sitting there waiting with anticipation of what am I going to see.
yeah.
And I think that like for me, that ability to meet each day with that anticipation is something that I really want to nurture within
Mhm.
myself. And so I think that one of my favorite things is when she talks about how as women, we feel like we have to explain ourselves.
Mhm.
And she says, explaining
Snaps
is
to that.
fear presenting its case. So explaining comes out of fear. So when we explain, we have this fear of having to justify ourselves. And I being in the jungle with these other 17 women, when I said to them, I spent an hour watching butterflies, I didn't explain anything. I didn't have to like say, "Oh, I just got so caught up in the moment." They understood, because they were in the wild too. And these, like, well, you have to surround yourself, I think, with people too that you don't have to explain yourself to. And I think that is one of the things that she talks about too, is who you let into your energy. She talks about how her family is an island and that there's a moat that's built around the island, and her family is on the island just living their best lives, and that they get to decide who they lower the drawbridge to come into that island. And I think that when we think of ourselves that way, it's really healthy because it helps us see that the thing that is worth protecting the most is ourselves,
Yeah.
you know? And she talks a lot about how your first vow has to be to yourself. Your most important vow is to yourself. And that really, I was talking with my husband about this afterwards and just how powerful it is because, we stand, when you get married to somebody, like I stood before God and made that vow to Daniel and to God that I would be with him until death do us part. And but the ultimate vow really is I will be with me
Yeah.
until death.
Yes.
And if I don't maintain that vow first, then no other vow matters. Um, and to recognize, I mean, I think when you become a mom too, it's so hard when you have a part of you, a part of your heart that lives outside your body, you
Mhm.
know? And it's easy to think I have to put that part of my heart first.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we wind up making ourselves smaller. And what we're teaching our children is you need to make yourself smaller.
Right. Oh,
Whereas
so good.
when we keep that vow to ourselves first, when we live big and authentically, it gives our children the permission to live big and authentically. And I think that that's, one of the things that we really need to encourage. And I know that, like, the other day, I don't like talking about my kids and what they say, but the other day one of my kids was talking about how they don't want to, like, disappoint me. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I hope to God you do, because it's sort of like we need to give our children permission to even disappoint us, to be loyal to themselves first. And that's a hard thing to do, because in our culture we're taught that as parents it's our job to keep our children under control.
Right. And what a huge responsibility that would be if you had to do that, and so many women say, "Yes, I have to do that," and
Yeah.
I will add on to that, Suzanne, that this morning I was, reading the Carolyn Hacks post. She has an advice column in the Washington Post, and it was a mom who was
Hmm.
saying, "What do I do about my adult son who lives with his dad?" So didn't live with her anymore, but lives with his dad, took, I think it was like 6 years to get his associate's degree. And then I'm telling him, like, you need to get a job now. You need to work, you need to be making more money, all of this. But now he's telling his dad, well, I think I want to get my bachelor's next. And she thinks that it's just his way of, prolonging having to get out on his own, still living under his dad's roof, all this. So, what do you think Carolyn's advice would be, and probably what Glennon's advice would be? And for any of us who have that emotional intelligence, if we believe this, that we're remembering our wild is the key to happiness, would say, and Carolyn was like, you got to back off.
Hmm.
He will alienate you by you continuing to trying to control him, like what you're
Right.
saying.
Right.
He is an adult, and that particular relationship and that circumstance is between he and his dad. She's not paying for anything, and so, but as parents, it's like we feel like we have responsibility for our kids being successful, but yet what is that success?
Right.
So she's thinking success means that you got to now go get a full-time job, maybe live on your own. But we know that so many young adults still do live at home for a
Hmm.
variety of reasons.
Hmm.
And who gets to say at what age we're supposed to be an adult and be on our own?
Yeah, well, and I think too, look at other cultures around the world where you frequently have three generations that live in the same house, if not more. I mean, it's such a construct that is a societal construct. And I think it's not that you avoid difficult conversations. I think, but you treat, and I'm a firm believer of even treating your small children this way. You treat them with respect. Now, you do have to, like, when they're really small, you are their external brain to keep them
Mhm.
safe in the world. So you have to create those boundaries that help to keep them safe. um, but yeah, like when you're talking about a relationship with an adult child, you interact with them, like, with that respect, leading with that respect first. You should always lead with love and respect. I am a firm believer of that. I used to have a literacy camp um, at the church that, oh my gosh, that is where I knew I made a difference. Um, because we'd have 60 to 75 kids each summer for 8 weeks. Every summer, probably half of the kids were foster children. And the goal of AmeriCorps, we partnered with AmeriCorps, and the goal of the AmeriCorps volunteers was to help them increase in their literacy over those 8 weeks. And that was a goal that we met every single year. My goal was to teach them that love and respect are givens, and that we should always lead with love and respect, but also they should always expect to receive love and respect from somebody else. And trust is something that can be earned or broken, but that those love and respects, those are the givens. And so um, I think that when you have a child and you're trying to, whether they're, even with your teens, you have to start interacting with them in a way that they know you see them as whole people. We have to lead with that love and respect. And that means, how would I want to be talked to in this situation?
Yeah.
How would I want someone to approach me in this situation? And so I think that is a situation where you can sit down and you can say, okay, help me understand.
Yeah.
What is it? And to be willing to stay calm through the initial defensiveness that is going to be there. Because all of us have that initial defensiveness, and to hold back through that initial defensiveness and not come back at it, but to realize that they're going to be, that what we were just saying a minute ago, that explaining is fear presenting itself, and so recognizing that if they're over explaining, recognize that as, hey, they're fearful here. I need to help put their fear at rest so that we can talk about what it is that they're feeling and understand each other better. And I do think that's something that I appreciate about what she says. And I do think that this is another thing that was along with that. She said, be yourself wherever you are and let the world adjust.
There you go. It starts with you.
It starts with you. And I think telling our children that too, from a very young age, that to be yourself wherever you are and let the world adjust. And I think about having raised a kid who has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and because of that needs to have his environment adjusted in order to function his best. That was one of the biggest challenges that we had growing up, is when you have a kid who's on a spectrum of any sort, and me being, I have a brain injury of 22 years ago, I had brain cancer. And so I have a golf ball size hole in my brain. My brain can't adjust. There is no way to change how my brain functions. I no longer have the capacity to completely adjust who I am, because the circuitry for my sensory processing and the circuitry for my language overlap each other now. Mm-hmm. And so when you have kids that are on the spectrum, a lot of times they don't have that capacity to adjust. So it really is advocating for teaching professionals to see that and recognize it and respect it, so that, simple things like, okay, he's getting distracted. Can you move his desk right up by your desk?
Right.
So that it's easier for him to focus on you. Can you let him fidget with something? Because when he's fidgeting, it helps him listen better. Otherwise, he's having to focus so much on not fidgeting. And if his focus is on not fidgeting, he can't hear.
Right.
And
Yeah.
all of us, the reality is all of us have brains that function best in certain situations, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is just being ourselves. And if the world can't handle it, that's the world's problem.
Well, so two things then that leads us to that are action items for the listeners. So
Mhm.
one, that you've said, self-awareness,
Yeah.
know what works for you, who you are. And then two, you're going to have to set yourself up for success with the things around you. Sometimes that is establishing the environment that works best for you.
Mhm.
And then telling others. So whether that's your boss, whether that's your partner, was like, don't be afraid to say what you need,
Right.
to voice that. If you don't ask, and so many women, we feel bad about asking, or we feel less than because we've asked. If we don't share that, they're not going to know. We
Yeah.
are not mind readers. And
Right.
so, but it starts with knowing ourselves,
Yeah.
setting yourself up for success in whatever situation you're in, and thinking about that before we go into it, to say, I know what's going to work for me, and what works for me may be completely different that works for you. And to not feel bad about that, to take out that shame and guilt.
Mhm.
And that's like, that leads into, for you guys that may want to get the Untamed journal, Suzann and I both have our copies. And sometimes I have several journals that I do. I think that's a great thing to do for self-awareness, is to journal in the mornings and have that be a part of your morning routine. So you might try that out if you haven't. But the cool thing about this book is she does talk about it's all based on things and ideas presented in the book, but then to just get you to think about, what do you want out of it? How does that work for you? So it's
Mhm.
it's reflection. It also feels like gratitude. It can feel like a challenge to say, I'm not leveling up there, or maybe I'm not being my authentic self, or maybe I got upset at someone else because they weren't doing what I wanted them to do. And so we have to be good about letting go of that control of other people in our lives too. I know I saw a study yesterday on why, so what produces happiness at work. And what the employees said is that, so in a healthy work environment, they said, my boss comes around and says, what do you need?
Mhm.
How can I help you today?
Mhm. Mhm.
And in unhealthy ones, and people who ditch their jobs, what is it? It's completely the opposite. They're like, all I hear from my boss is what I'm doing wrong,
Mhm.
instead of what I'm doing right, and not providing me with the tools and resources necessary. So I think, so it's both of that, knowing that for ourselves, and then being really good about asking that of others, to say, how
Mhm.
can I help you? Just like asking that son,
Mhm.
help me understand this. Like, what is your goal, or why does that work for you? Why does that not? Instead of judging others for not doing it the way we want to, or the timeline that we want.
Yeah. 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 That is one of the things in the work that I do. Like, I go in and I help to, like, assess, people understand, like, where they really get energized in the creative problem solving process and where they get drained, and to help teams understand that about one another. Because subconsciously, we will always divert to the easiest neurological path, you know? So, if we are somebody who gets really stimulated thinking of lots of ideas when we're presented with a problem, we're going to go right there. If we're somebody who gets really stimulated by digging into the questions and the research, we're going to go right there. And when you have a team that works well, when you have a boss who really wants innovation and success, they're the people who will recognize, hey, everybody on my team is different, and I need to know who they are and understand how I can help them the most. Um, and so I think you're exactly right, and I worked in a church that, I mean, people think, oh, working at a church, that would be such a loving, grateful experience. And the reality is I worked in one church that very much was that way. And then I worked in another church that was just, it was like how much they could get out of you, you know? And I remember like one of the cages that they put me in was actually a cage around my brain injury. And they told me that I was lucky to have a job. And when you have a disability, that is definitely a cage in our society, that people act like they're doing you a favor by giving you a job instead of recognizing, hey, your perspective is an amazing perspective that we need, and we need you to help us see how the world is for people who have different challenges.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and that's the thing. I am I'm a woman of faith. And I say that saying also I'm a woman that is greatly disillusioned by institutional religion, you know, and that's coming as a minister, because like I know how the sausage is made. You know, when you work in the
Right.
sausage factory, you know how the sausage is made, and every institution, whether it be religious or academic or corporate, the goal of the institution eventually becomes protecting the institution. You know,
Yeah.
it's just how it works. And so, and that's why like breaking down into institutionalized racism or institutionalized sexism is so hard, because there is such a force in protecting the institution rather than a force for innovation and creativity and productivity and what would be most effective and progressive and the way to grow. And so I think that that's one of, and now my brain has forgotten where it was going.
No, you are good. And that is what I hope that all of you listeners out there can take from this. First of all, of course, every week, we're going to recommend that you buy the book or get it from the library, and then a lot of people like to take in this information as an audio book. That's great too. However you're going to get it, or even if you just read a summary of these major points and use that as a reflection
Mhm.
to how can I remember my wild? Like, what, maybe you've forgotten the joy over the years, the joy that you had as a child, or maybe you didn't really get to have a childhood because if you came from a place of trauma, or you did have a parent that was an overachiever and that they didn't really let you take that hour to watch the butterflies. I think I shared something similar to that in my stories yesterday, where it was like we're messing with our children's childhood when we try to rush them along
Mhm.
and to make them hit those benchmarks at a certain time period. And that doesn't acknowledge that each of them are so different.
Mhm.
And why the rush? Because
Yeah.
we go, 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 go. And then suddenly, at what point are you going to rest? At what point are you even going to give yourself that time? And self-care is big, big, big now, and it should be. But how many people actually practice it, I'm not sure, because it's such a buzzword. But to me, self-care means giving yourself that time to reflect and pause and get off the treadmill that
Right.
could be the rat race, and let yourself do things like go to Costa Rica, and connect. And uh, so share with us, and we'll end with this, Suzann, but share with us what your biggest takeaway was from your time spent in Costa Rica and doing that for yourself.
I think my biggest takeaway is just, gosh, it's good to just be,
Mhm.
you know, and you don't have to be in a place like that to just be.
Sure.
Just to sit and to be present in every moment. I mean, that's something that has become so huge in my life in the last year. And, you know, I reinforce that with like meditation and yoga. Um, but all we have is now.
Right.
Um, you know, all we have is this moment now. And each of us gets to choose how we respond to this moment now. We don't get to choose what happens in this moment now. you know.
Right.
We don't get to choose what happens. And I like that there were things that she talked about in terms of not avoiding the pain, not avoiding the hard feelings. That we get to sit in this moment now, and we get to choose how we respond to this moment now. And I think for me, just being in Costa Rica and being like, one of the things that there's a motto in Costa Rica, and it's Pura Vida, and it means embrace the simple life. And when, I don't know if any of you out there have ever been to Hawaii, but the only place I've ever been that was as much like Costa Rica was Hawaii, where the people who
Gorgeous.
live there just love being there. And they
Mhm.
have an attitude of, it's all about now. It's all about this moment now, and just stay in this moment. And I think, you don't have to have mountain, rainforest, amazing waterfall conditions with just like amazing plants and butterflies and all of that to embrace that attitude. You can embrace that attitude wherever you are. And I think that's, for me, how do I surround myself with reminders? How do I surround myself with little uh, ways to remember that I am alive and I'm here and God is with me, you know?
Absolutely.
I God is in each of us, and that's what I believe, and I love that that's what Glennon believes too, and part of what she talks about. When I most of my ministry was spent working with kids, and I used to tell people that my job was to not let the church teach the God out of them, because we all, and I think that's part of, as parents, is to not let society teach the God out of our kids. For me, God is love, and I think that that's the thing. I think love is intuitive.
Mhm.
We are born with love. Um, there is nothing that is. I mean, I don't want to belittle how hard it is to have a newborn. But the smell of a newborn. When you smell their head, there's just something magical about it.
Right.
And there's something so beautiful about a new life coming into the
Mhm.
world. And I feel like there's something beautiful about when a life exits this world too. I've been present in that moment a lot. And those transitions are just beautiful,
Yeah.
because they can be filled with such love. But I think that biggest takeaway from me, with the both Untamed and with Costa Rica, is to just embrace who you are
Absolutely.
and be present in the moment.
And don't let another day go by that you are not paying attention to that, and that
Mhm,
you are not practicing self-love, because
mhm,
that's where it begins. How can we
mhm,
give it to other people when we don't have it for ourselves? Here at Chicks in Charge, our February theme is self-love, and so we're gonna be talking about that in each of our chapters. We'll be talking about that in our private groups. Encourage all the listeners to go to our website and find out more about that. If you want community and you want a group of women that are going to empower you to be your best self and just love you where you are,
mhm,
and we're going to meet each other where we are, or find that in another community. But whatever you do, make that a priority, because that moment from birth to death, we don't know how long that is.
mhm,
And so, acknowledging and loving ourselves in every moment, because this is all we have and we don't know
mhm.
what tomorrow will bring or what the next hour will bring, is so powerful, just in that statement. So I want to thank you, Suzann, for being our guest today. You all can connect with her. I'll have all that information in our show notes and on our website and our YouTube channel. And wherever you have heard, thank you for subscribing. We've got got about 8 more books coming up that we're going to be talking about too. Again, one of my favorite things is just exploring all of these questions about life through these authors who have done such a great job in helping us to realize what we want for our lives and to empower us to go for our dreams. So that's why we're here. And thank you for being here today, Suzann. And I will see you soon.
All right. Thank you, Malena.